Every single thing you have ever wanted, every desire, every craving, every obsession that has kept you up at night has a source. And that source is not random. It is not weakness. It is not a malfunction. It is a system. A system so old that one of the greatest minds in human history spent his entire life trying to map it. And what he found 2,500 years ago is so accurate to how human beings actually behave that modern neuroscience keeps accidentally rediscovering it. His name was Plato. And what he discovered was not just a theory of the soul. It was a map of why you want what you want, and why wanting the wrong things, in the wrong order, quietly destroys people from the inside out. Today we decode that map, and by the end of this video, you will understand your own desires in a way that most people spend their entire lives never achieving. Subscribe before we go any further. Let's get into it. Part 1. The three parts of the soul. Plato believed that the human soul, what we would today call the human mind or the human psyche, is not a single unified thing. It is three things, existing simultaneously, often in conflict with each other. He called the first part the logos. This is the rational part, the part that reasons, that plans, that understands consequences, that can look at a situation and calculate what the wisest response would be. The logos is the part of you that knows you should go to sleep at a reasonable hour, that knows the argument isn't worth continuing, that knows the extra drink will cost you tomorrow. It operates in the language of reason and long-term thinking. He called the second part the Thymos. This is the spirited part, the part that needs to feel recognized, respected, and significant. It is the source of your pride, your anger, your competitive drive, your need to be seen as someone who matters. The Thymos is the part of you that cannot let a slight pass unacknowledged, that burns when you are dismissed, that swells when you are admired. It does not speak in the language of reason. It speaks in the language of honor and dignity. He called the third part the Epithymia. This is the appetitive part, the source of your most basic desires. Hunger, thirst, sexual desire. The craving for pleasure, for comfort, for physical satisfaction. The epithymia is not sophisticated. It does not think. It does not calculate. It simply wants, with an immediacy and an intensity that the other two parts of the soul cannot always resist. Hit that like button right now if you already recognize all three of these operating inside you, because what comes next is where it gets genuinely disturbing. Part 2. The Chariot. To explain how these three parts of the soul relate to each other, Plato used one of the most enduring metaphors in the history of philosophy. He described the soul as a chariot being pulled by two horses. One horse is noble, obedient, well-trained. It moves in the right direction when guided. This horse represents the Thymos, the spirited part, the need for recognition and significance. When properly directed, it is a powerful force for good. It gives you the drive to pursue excellence, to fight for what you believe is right, to refuse to be diminished. The other horse is wild, unruly, difficult to control. It pulls constantly in the direction of immediate pleasure and physical satisfaction, regardless of where the chariot is supposed to be going. This is the epithymia, the appetitive part, the source of raw desire. And the charioteer, the person holding the reins, trying to direct both horses toward a worthy destination, is the logos. The rational mind, the part of you that knows where you should be going, and is constantly working to keep both horses moving in that direction. Now here is the insight that should stop you cold. Plato did not say the wild horse was evil. He did not say desire was the enemy. He said that the problem is not the horses. The problem is a weak charioteer. When the logos is strong, when reason is developed, disciplined, and genuinely in control, both horses can be directed towards something meaningful. The noble horse's drive for recognition gets channeled into genuine achievement. The wild horse's desire for pleasure gets satisfied in ways that don't destroy the direction of travel. But when the logos is weak, when reason has been neglected, when the charioteer is distracted, undeveloped, or has simply given up, the wild horse takes over. And a chariot being pulled by an uncontrolled wild horse does not go somewhere interesting. It goes in circles. Or it crashes. Part 3. The hierarchy of desires here is where Plato's theory becomes most practically relevant to how you actually live. He argued that human souls, human personalities, human lives can be ranked by which part of the soul is in control. At the highest level is what he called the philosopher, the person whose logos genuinely governs their life. This is not someone who has no desires or no need for recognition. It is someone whose rational mind has learned to work with the other two parts of the soul, rather than being overwhelmed by them. They feel desire. They feel the need for significance. But those drives are directed by reason toward things that are actually worth pursuing. Below that is what he called the timocrat, the person whose life is governed primarily by the Thymos, by the need for honor, recognition, and victory. This person can accomplish significant things. But their driving question is always, how do I look? Rather than, is this actually right? They are competitive to a fault. They need to win even when winning is not the point. Their life is organized around the opinions of others. Below that is the oligarch, the person whose life is governed by the desire for wealth and material security. Not because wealth is inherently corrupting, but because when the accumulation of resources becomes the organizing principle of a life, everything else, relationships, integrity, genuine experience gets evaluated only in terms of its material utility. The oligarch is safe, but they are not free. Below that is what Plato called the democratic person, someone who gives equal weight to all their desires, treating every impulse as equally valid, equally deserving of satisfaction. This person appears free. They appear liberated, spontaneous, open to everything, but without any hierarchy of values, without any principle of discrimination between worthwhile and worthless desires. This apparent freedom is actually just drift. The democratic soul is at the mercy of whatever desire is loudest in the moment. And at the bottom, the person Plato considered the most enslaved of all is what he called the tyrant. Not a political tyrant necessarily, though his analysis clearly applied there. The tyrannical soul is the person whose epithymia has completely overwhelmed the other two parts. They are ruled entirely by appetite, by craving, by addiction, by obsessive desire. They believe themselves to be the freest person imaginable, because they pursue whatever they want without restraint. But Plato's insight was devastating. The person with the most unrestrained desires is not free. They are the most enslaved to the desires themselves. They cannot not pursue them. The wild horse has thrown the charioteer completely and is running wherever it wants. And what looks like freedom is actually just an inability to stop. Subscribe right now if this framework is giving you a new way to see something about yourself or someone you know. Because the next part is where this stops being ancient philosophy and starts being your actual life. Part 4. The modern tyrannical soul. Plato wrote about tyrannical souls in the context of ancient Athens. But if he were alive today, he would not need to look far for examples. He would open a browser. The entire architecture of modern digital life is built on the epithymia. Social media platforms are not designed to engage your logos. They are not designed to make you think more clearly, or live more wisely. They are designed to identify your appetitive desires, your craving for novelty, for validation, for outrage, for titillation, and feed those desires in a loop that is just satisfying enough to keep you returning, and just unsatisfying enough to keep you wanting more. The scroll is the wild horse, and the charioteer, your rational mind, your long-term judgment, your sense of what actually matters, gets progressively weakened every time the scroll wins. This is not a moral failing. It is an engineered outcome. The people who build these systems understand the epithymia better than most philosophers ever did. They have mapped its patterns in real-time data across billions of users. And they have built environments specifically calibrated to keep the wild horse running while the charioteer is distracted. The result, and Plato would have recognized this immediately, is a generation of democratic souls tipping steadily toward the tyrannical. Not because people are bad, because the environment has made the epithymia easy to feed, and the logos progressively harder to sustain. Part 5. The Thymos trap, but desire is not the only part of the soul being systematically exploited. The Thymos, the need for recognition, for significance, for honor, is being weaponized just as effectively, and in some ways more insidiously. Every notification is a Thymos event. Someone liked what you said. Someone agreed with you. Someone acknowledged your existence and found it worth responding to. The platform is not just feeding your appetite for pleasure. It is feeding your hunger to matter, to be seen, to be recognized as someone whose voice is worth hearing. And here is where Plato's analysis becomes genuinely dark. He believed that the Thymos, when properly directed, was one of the most powerful forces for genuine human achievement. The need to be recognized for doing something genuinely worthy, this drive has built civilizations. It has produced art, science, philosophy, heroism, but the Thymos, when misdirected, when the hunger for recognition gets satisfied by something that requires no real achievement, no real excellence, just the performance of a recognizable identity, it doesn't produce greatness. It produces something that looks like pride, but feels perpetually empty, because the recognition is real, but the thing being recognized is not. You can spend your entire life being recognized for your opinions, your persona, your aesthetic, your brand and feel, underneath all of it, that you have not actually done anything. That the recognition is hollow because what it is recognizing is hollow. That is the Thymos trap, and Plato saw it coming 25 centuries before the like button existed. Part 6. What Plato actually wanted here is what is so often misunderstood about Plato's theory. He was not arguing for the suppression of desire. He was not saying that the epithymia and the Thymos are enemies to be defeated. He was saying something far more nuanced and far more difficult. He was saying that a good life, a genuinely free life, a life that feels worth living from the inside, requires that the three parts of the soul be in the right relationship with each other. Not the suppression of desire, but its proper ordering. Not the elimination of the need for recognition, but its redirection toward things that are actually worth being recognized for. The logos is not supposed to starve the horses. It is supposed to guide them. And that guidance, the continuous, often exhausting work of keeping reason genuinely in charge of where your life is going, is what Plato meant by wisdom. Not intelligence, not knowledge. Wisdom, the practical capacity to direct your own soul toward what actually matters. This is harder now than it has ever been. The forces aligned against the charioteer are more sophisticated, more relentless, and more intimately calibrated to your specific weaknesses than anything Plato could have imagined. The wild horse has access to more food than ever before, And the noble horse is being fed a diet of empty recognition that satisfies just enough to prevent it from demanding something real. But the charioteer is still there. The logos has not disappeared. It has just been in many people, for many years neglected. Underdeveloped, outrun, closing 2,500 years ago, a man sat in Athens and watched people pursue their desires with total confidence that getting what they wanted would make them happy. And he noticed something that the people themselves could not see, that the ones who got everything they wanted were often the least free of all. He noticed that the wild horse, when it wins, does not celebrate. It just runs. And the people being dragged behind it do not feel free. They feel exhausted, empty, and strangely unable to stop. And he wrote it down in language that, if you translate it carefully enough, sounds almost exactly like a description of your phone. The question he was really asking, the question behind all of the philosophy and the metaphor and the careful reasoning, was the same question that matters today. Who is holding the reins? Not who should be. Not who you wish was. Who actually is, right now, in your life directing where you go? If the answer is the logos, if reason, genuine reflection, your own considered values are genuinely guiding your desires and your need for recognition, then you are as free as a human being can be. Not perfectly free, not above desire, but free in the way that actually matters. Free to go somewhere you actually chose. If the answer is something else, if the wild horse has been running longer than you want to admit, then this is not a verdict. It is a starting point. The charioteer does not have to stay on the ground, but they do have to decide to get back up. Hit that like button if this changed how you see something today. Drop in the comments which part of Plato's soul do you think runs your life most of the time. Logos, Thymos, or Epithymia? Drop it below. I read every single one. And subscribe before you go, because next week we go even deeper into the hidden architecture of the human mind. And you do not want to miss it. Until then, pick up the reins.